Well, technology like artificial intelligence continues to evolve, and of course, that does mean threats, including with cybersecurity. At last week's RSAC conference in San Francisco, Proofpoint CEO Sumit Dhawan broke it all down with JD Durkin. Let's take a listen.
You know, I think everyone thinks when they think about security, there's a bunch of people sitting and detecting stuff that's going on and recovering from it in case something bad happens. But at the end of the day, if you look at all the research, large majority of threats coming through people. Okay, it's people who get socially engineered threats, and they're coming in from what we think of as phishing or business compromise or fraud, and that trend keeps going up. You know, just 5 years ago, we all know we've seen these threats that would come in the form of an email where we could tell, reading it, that this looks like someone who didn't know me or the language who wrote it. Not anymore. Okay, with the advent of the new AI-centric tools, creating more sophisticated threats and running them in volume for everyone is here. And it's here to stay forever. And that's what we focus on. We call it human-centric security at Proofpoint. That's what we serve for 485 out of Fortune 100.
There's no doubt that the world of cybersecurity threats continues to evolve, but so does the regulatory landscape. How are you balancing innovation with the increasing patchwork of global compliance regulations? You know,
compliance is usually handled in terms of bare minimum, okay? So we think of compliance as providing the tool set for enterprises to be successful in meeting the requirements, but not stopping there. Because compliance is usually making sure that people handle the data properly for privacy purposes or in certain cases just for data security purposes. So we provide the right set of solutions for this to handle the bare minimum compliance. But what we see when it comes to compliance these days, the rules are outdated. They're not sufficient to really protect the enterprises. If you think about it, when the compliance rules were often written, they were written when Zoom didn't exist, when new forms of communications, call it WhatsApp or Signal, didn't exist. Now you need to handle all forms of communications and have the right degree of governance on it. So I always encourage enterprise customers that I'm speaking with, don't just look at the letter of the law when you're thinking of compliance. Just think about a hygiene of the right degree of governance for all of your communications and data, which is again a human-centric problem and a key capability we provide as part of our platform.
AI-fueled threats are without a doubt on the rise, whether we're talking synthetic attacks or things like deepfakes. How are you and the team at Proofpoint aiming to stay one step ahead of how bad actors are leveraging artificial intelligence?
You know, with cybersecurity, this is one industry which has always used fairly sophisticated set of models. I'm just going to call them models because there is debate on what's AI and what's not AI, and a lot of people say that there's overuse of the word AI. But Proofpoint has always been built on fairly sophisticated, say, machine learning models, which are detecting the patterns. And based on the patterns, it's basically assessing is good communications or is it potential threat that has to be condemned. And with the advent of AI, what we've had to do is evolve and innovate and build new generative AI models. In other words, now with our language models, we can detect the intent behind something that's coming to you. And if we detect the intent that's just spurious, we condemn it. Okay, so that's the evolution of the technology now. We call it Nexus. This is sort of this ensemble of very sophisticated models that keep improving. And what we see is the volume of threats are going up, threats coming in every possible language in areas where language or size was enough of a deterrent for threat actors to pursue enterprises. Now, whether a customer is in Japan or Middle East, they're going to get attacked the same way as if the customer is in English, because language is no longer a barrier for threat actors. So our language models, which are far more than semantic models, are able to work across all languages and detect the intent for all of these communications and condemn the threats if we see that these are spurious attacks.
If you could wave a magic wand and magically fix one challenge, one pain point for the cybersecurity industry, what would it be?
You know, I think the one challenge that exists in this industry is complexity and fragmentation. The industry has been brought up by technical practitioners who like buying and using tools to solve pain points. In our viewpoint, there are 3 runtime cybersecurity stacks that formulate a cybersecurity architecture. There is something that is there for defense and response, which is, like I mentioned at the start of the conversation, there are people who need to detect and respond if something bad happens. There is a last line of defense, used to be firewall, now people work from everywhere, so it's called SASE, or your edge that's protecting, and that's your perimeter or your last line of defense. And then there is preventive solution, which is human-centric, because all the preventive stuff has to be done at human level, which is where we play in. So I always encourage CISOs to think about a cybersecurity architecture with these three major components and rely on best-in-class solutions for these three things and make sure they work together. That's a magic wand I keep waving every day.